So yesterday we learned the Mishnah on the top of Daf Tzadi Vav Amid Beis, and we're up to the Gemara. You may remember that the Mishnah records a machlokes, actually two cases of a machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon. In the first machlokes, the issue revolves around the status of bias katan ben tesha in a yibum scenario, and specifically whether or not you can have one bia after the other of two yavamim, and the first bia generates an iser on the second yavam, and the second bia of the second yavam now reciprocally generates an iser psul on the first yavam. That's the sheet of the chacham. And we've really encountered this in the past on the previous Amud with regard to Maimon, Yesh Maimon Acham Maimon. And Reb Shimon disagrees, and he says no. Although the first bia of katan number one, we'll call it, generates a psul on the second katan, the second bia of the katan could have no impact on the first, because Rabbi Shimon holds that bias katan has the same status as a maimer, and therefore he was already konem in Rabbanan, the Yavama, with the first bia. And once he was kona her, then no other brother could have the ability to generate an isa on the first brother. And in the second machlokes,
having bia with the second brother, she should be also on the first one.
No, he's saying that the first one made a kinyan, and it's not like the case of Maimar, which is a mixas kinyan, and still leaves room for someone else to make a Maimar.
Yeah, let's say if you get it's a Yolam, if she's married and someone has bia with her,
and he's been test.
So that doesn't be us. Isn't she also on her husband on the first?
Yeah, not only that, she'll be put to death.
Well, he's the same thing then.
Correct. So Rav Shimon is saying that bia of a katan in the case of human is like a full-fledged marriage relation, because all the Torah requires is bia. So there's no way that the second katan could generate an iser once. In fact, in essence, the second katan's bia should be like bia's nus of an HC. Correct. So therefore, Rav Shimon holds that the chachamim put bia of a katan in yibum on a low level. Rav Shimon is recognizing it and jacking it up to the highest level. Therefore, it's as if he was miyabim. Let's say, for example, the brother was a gadol and he was miyabim with bia. Then there's no way that any of the other brothers could generate an iser once the yibum has been actualized. And Rav Shimon is upgrading the status of bias katan to a marriage kind of relationship in such a way that no one has the right or the ability to generate an iser.
But once the second brother is done, so she is also to the first one, to the first brother. Either one.
Well, we're talking about a shogeg.
Does it make a difference?
Yeah. When you're talking about bias nus now of an HSH, that's only b'mezid, not b'shogeg.
Not b'shogeg?
No, not b'shogeg.
This is the shogeg.
I'm saying the mitzias that we're talking about here is that of a if she's allowed to resume her relationship with the first yom, then we're talking about where the second bia was b'shogeg. Otherwise, you're right. It's an HSH sinsa. Now we get to the second machlokas recorded in the Mishnah, and that's the case where one yavam has bia with two wives of his late brother. Now, as you know, once yibum has taken place, all the other sorrows of his late brother, we'll call him Reuven, now become Ashes Ach. Why? Because once he fulfills the mitzvah of Yibum, then any other brother who would have, including himself, the one who's Miyabim, who would have a relationship with any one of the other wives of the late brother Reuven, they would be violating the erva of Ashes Ach. And now the Chachamim say that if this bia took place with both wives of Reuven, in other words, he had bia achar bia with two Yevamos, right? Is then what happens is the second bia is recognized. According to, again, Rav Shimon is going to disagree, but according to Tanakama, the second bia is recognized, and that means it generates a psul. So if we look at the second bia, which he had with the other wife of Reuven, we call it Sarah, then that's going to generate a psul on the first one. Only because on a Drabanan level, we recognize that second bia. And Rav Shimon again is going to be consistent and say, well, the second bia is meaningless. It doesn't register at all. So therefore, he's still in a state of being usher on the tzara, but he's allowed to resume his relationship with the first wife, so to speak, meaning the first one he has bia with. All right. So now we're going to pick up the Gemara here. Amen. So this sugya is all about Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon is going to use what we call a mimanavsha to undermine the sheet of the Chacham. And he says the following: take a stand on the following issue. What is the status of bia? Bia Rishona, right? The first bia. In bia Rishona, bia, in other words, if you're recognizing the validity of that bia of a katan, so then it should be a kinyan. It should be equal to yibum. Is bia shniya in a bia? Once yibum was already actualized, no bia of any other brother could generate an iser on a situation of a full-fledged yibum. And we're now holding on this tzad that bia rishona, bia. So now we consider this woman vis-a-vis the first yavam who did the bia as ishta. She's his wife. The im, and if you're going to tell me the other way around, that bia rishona ain't a bia, is then bia shniya ain't a bia. You should be consistent. So why do you assume that there's any significance to the bia rishona? And why would you generate an iser on the rishon because of the bia shniya if bia ain't a bia? And the Gemara doesn't offer any explanation or justification for the Rabbanan. It seems like the Rabbanan are being inconsistent. Again, we'll come back and try to explain the Rabbanan as we did yesterday, but the argument of Rabbi Shimon is a very solid argument. But now the Gemara points out that we've been oblivious to another shita of Ben Azza. Mastisin de lo ke Ben Azza. So our Mishnah, insofar as it doesn't make a distinction between two Yevamim Ktanim who had a relationship with one single Yevama, as opposed to the case of the Yavam Katan who has bia with two Yevamos, meaning with Isha B'tzarasa. Those were all lumped together. And in both cases, the Rabbanan applied the principle of Yesh Maimer Achamaimar and Yesh Bia Achar Bia. Is Masnisin to Loki Ben Hazai the Sanya Ben Azai is going to make a fundamental distinction between two different cases. Case number one, where the two Yevamim, two brothers who had Bia or Maimar with the same Yevama, as opposed to one Yavam who has Maimar or Bia with two Yevamos. Ben Azai Omer, Yesh Maimar HaMaimar B'shnei Yevamim. So it's one woman who received Maimar from two different brothers, and we're going to apply the principle of Yesh Maimar Acham Maimar, such that the second Maimar will generate the ping pong. We called it an Isser Psul on the first brother. But Ein Maimar Acham Maimar B'shtei Yevamos B'Yavam Echad. If it's the same Yavam, and he implements Maimar with two different wives of his late brother, then the second Maimar does not register at all. So again, if they're two different brothers, each one did a Maimar on the same Yevama, then Ben Azai agrees to the Chachamim, we will recognize not only the validity of the first Maimar, but of the second Maimar as well. But if the same Yavam chooses to implement a Maimar with both of these wives of his late brother, meaning both Yevamos, then Ben Azai says, Ein Maimar Acham Maimar. That's against our Mishnah, because our Mishnah, whether it's the Tanakama or the Chachamim, lumped together the case of two Yevamim, Yavmim, in the same Yevama, with the case of the same Yavam with two Yevamos. And those are all equal in the eyes of our Mishnah, and Ben Azai makes the distinction. Now, what is the logic of Ben Azai? He says here the following: Shnei achim she'asu maimar b'yevama achas b'zecher zeh. And the same thing will apply in bias katan. If, let's say, two Yevamim Ktanim have bia one after the other. Is kevan shemaimar eno moil ela mitakanas chachamim v'eno kinyan gomer min haTorah. Since the status of a maimar is somewhat ambiguous, it's not recognized on a Torah level. The Torah says it's either bia or bas. There's no other alternative of kesef or shtar. So the Rabbanan are the ones who are recognizing Maimar as a valid kinyan, but the Torah did not recognize it. Is therefore kocham shel shnei Yevamim shaveh. Both Yevamim have the same relationship to this Yevama. She was kuka liyivim for both brothers equally. And now the Rabbanan are offering to recognize the Maimar of each one of these two brothers. You know, on a psychological level, it's almost as if each brother wants to exercise his rights first, and he wants to get in there first, and he's not ready for Yibum for whatever reason, so he'll do a Maimar. But each brother is equally equipped by the Rabbanan with that right of Maimar. And therefore, the fact that one brother got there first is not going to undermine the second Maimar of the second Yavam. He writes here, V'ein Yavam echad yochel afkia kocho shel hasheni al yidei mamor. Now we get to Maimar Achar Maimar of the same Yavam, with two Yavamos. Kasher asa Yavam echad Maimar b'shtei Yavam zu achar zu, eina Maimar hasheni tofes. Says Ben Azai, the second Maimar is not relevant. Umuteres lo harishona. Mishum she'achar she'asa Maimar rishona paka kol kocho v'kinyono shel takanas chacham. The chacham gave you one shot at Maimar. You have a zchus for one Maimar. V'ein lo koach lasos Maimar sheni kinyan v'yavam ashnir. So we have all told three different approaches in Tanoim One approach is Maimer is Maimer. The Rabbanon recognized Maimer. Again, it's not a Kinyan Gomor, it's not a complete Kinyan. After all, the Torah doesn't recognize Maimer. But if it's enough of Maimer that we have to recognize its validity and its ability to generate a psul. And that applies in two scenarios. One is Maimer HaMaimer in two Yevamim, on the same Yevama. And secondly, if he himself wants to exercise his rights to create a Miktsas Kinyan, a quasi Kinyan, with two Yevamos, with both Rachel and Leah. That's one approach. Then we have Ben Azai's approach. I mean, he's basically on the same page as the Rabbanon, but with one exception. He adds a proviso that when the Rabbanon invented or recognized this entity called Maimer, we grant the Yavam one shot at Maimer, but not two. Both brothers are equal in their rights or authority or koach to create a Maimer, but one Yavam can only create one Maimer. The second Maimer doesn't register. Now we have the Shita of Shimon. Reb Shimon says that the status of a Maimer on a Drabanan level is that of a Sofek. We don't know what exactly is the nature of Maimer and what is its validity. It may be a Kinyan or it may be nothing. But it can't be anything in the middle. Rabbi Shimon has zero tolerance for an ambiguous Maimer that's called half of a Maimer. You know, we say either she's pregnant or she's not pregnant. You can't say she's half pregnant. So if you have a potato, either you bake the potato or you don't bake it at all. It's not a half-baked potato. So therefore, according to Reb Shimon, the second Maimar could not possibly generate any sort of psul. Why? Because we're going to go through the following Mimanavsham. If the first Maimer is to be recognized as a Kinyan, then there's no room for another Kinyan. He's not working with the premise that Maimer is some sort of a zchus that the Rabbanon granted to the Yavam. You know, it's an inalienable right to chaparayim, chaptetzi, and make a Maimer, and then we have to be fair to the second brother and recognize his ability. No. That's not Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is looking at Maimer, and he's saying the Rabbanon looked at the Maimer, they didn't know exactly what to do. Does Maimer on a Drabbana level have the status of a Kinyan, or does it not? If it doesn't, then it's nothing. It doesn't register. So we can't say that the second Maimer could effectuate a Kinyan because the first Maimer already effectuated a Kinyan. And if the first Maimer didn't effectuate a Kinyan, then it's nothing with nothing. So certainly the second Maimer would also be ineffective to create and generate a Kinyan. The same logic of Reb Shimon is going to apply to the case of one Yavam who does Maimer or Bias Katan with two different Yavamos, with two different wives of the late brother. Because what's the second Maimer going to accomplish? It can't accomplish anything. If the first Maimer was a valid Kinyan, his ain Kinyan achar Kinyan, she's already considered Midrabanan Eishes the first one. And if on the other hand, the Kinyan is not a Kinyan, then the second Maimer is also not a Kinyan. And it cannot establish it.
Apply if the Maimer for the first one be on the second one?
I don't know. That's more complicated. I don't want to answer your question off the top of my head. I would say that the laws of Maimar in the case of a Gadol would be equal to the laws of Bia in the case of a Katan. But if you're going to combine the two, let's say there was a Maimer and then a Bia, I don't know. I'd have to, think about that. And that might touch on another issue about Zika, what the status of Zika is. All right. Now, the Masifta offers a very long-winded introduction to the next mission. And we should really photocopy this. Steve, do you have a minute to do that? Because again, it's almost a page long. And for me to read it to you, so it's this page here. Steve is my reliable, professional photocopy man.
I'll be here Sunday.
Sunday, you're not around. But you're not going up to the Golan like Jeff.
No.
Jeff will be here on Sunday after his trip to the Golan. Mitzvah. Ruvain, how are you, Ruvain? Can you unmute yourself for a second?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
Where are you living now? I don't.
No, I'm nearby.
Here in
I'm
Katama.
nearby. Right. I'm nearby.
What's the name of the street? Maybe I would know it.
I'm on Rachel Asher.
Asher. Oh, I know where Asher is. It's right across from
By
Nitzanim, I think it's called,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What's your official status? You're an Oleh?
Yeah, I'm an Oleh, but we're heading back to the States in 3 weeks.
You have a place where? In New Jersey, right?
By my mother-in-law, Muncie.
Muncie, in Muncie. Yeah, to me, Muncie is New Jersey.
Well, we were in New Jersey before, but now we're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's my fault. I always tell myself, don't put the tea on the table. Yeah, I'll just clean that up a little bit. Yeah. There you go. Okay. It's my fault. I have a Kabbalah which I always violate, and that's leaving my tea on the table. Okay. Okay. Now, we have a Mishnah. Again, for us, it's a Mishnah that we never learned. But in terms of Seder Adapim, it's just a chazorah on a Mishnah that came before the 10th parak. And that's on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. Shlosha achim nesuim l'shalosh noshim. So these women are not sisters. So 3 brothers married 3 wives. Meis echad mihem. So now Ruvain's wife falls for Yibum to Shimon and Levi. The Asaba Shimon, Maimar Umeis. So Shimon was not miyamim her. He only did Maimar. Okay? Nafla ha'isha la'ach hashlishi le'yibum. Because now Shimon died. So we're talking about the wife of Reuven and of Shimon. This woman has been married to both Reuven and Shimon. The only thing is that in the case of Reuven, it was a full-fledged marriage. In the case of Shimon, it was what we call a combination of A plus B. It was Zika plus Maimon. That's Shimon's relationship to Ashes Reuven. Now Shimon dies. Now let's just think about this.
It's not a cotton.
No, Levi's not a cotton. It's not.
He's not a cotton.
No, they were all 3 Gedolim, and they were all 3 Golam Achas. That's what we have to emphasize. So Reuven, Shimon, and Levi coexisted. Now we have a principle called Eshes Shnei Achim, which means the following: that if a woman falls for Yibum from 2 different brothers to the 3rd brother, right? From 2 different brothers simultaneously, then there's no Yibum. And the Gemara is going to derive that from a pasuk. That's just, again, an axiom, like we spoke about when we were learning Kutch, right? Now, it's a strange kind of thing. On a Doraisa level, she's falling for Yibum from Reuven. Reuven is projecting her, so to speak, to Levi, right? Reuven's surviving brother Levi through Zika. But on the other hand, the very moment that Shimon did Maimar, okay, we'll get to Zika in a second, but just to focus on Maimar, then she now becomes Eshes Shimon. And to some extent, you could argue that that replaces and undermines the Ishus to Reuben. But on the other hand, Maimer is only D'Rabbanan. We cannot ignore the Zika of Eshes Reuben through Reuben. So on a D'Rabbanan level, we now have a situation of Eshes Shnei Yevamot, where she's falling for Yibum on a D'Oraisa level from Reuven, but on a D'Rabbanan level from Shimon. So the Rabbanan says, they say he Asura Olam. That means that Levi cannot implement Yibum to, we'll call her Sarah, the wife of Reuven, who's also, to some extent, the wife of his late brother Shimon. Now, what do you mean Zika Shnei Yevamot? The answer is, once we introduce the Rabbanan into the rabbinic law, meaning on a derisa level, the Maimer of Shimon, with all due respect, is worthless. So certainly you have to assume that the Zika comes through Reuven, but nevertheless she has a Zika through Shimon as well. Why is that? Because Zika Sasheni Nigrama Al Yedei Maimer. Again, that's all the Rabbanan. But she now is Rabbanan considered the wife of Shimon. Now keep in mind, Rabbi said, this should even apply if I maintain Ein Zika, because all the emphasis here is on the Maimer. If you add Yesh Zika into the equation, you might come up with the Doraisa of Shnei Yevamot. Possibly, I don't know. Now, where is the source for the psul of Shnei Yevamot? Darshina me'apasuk umeis echad mehem Yevamot yavoleh. The mitzvah of Yibum applies because one brother died. Misha oleh zikas Yavam. Echad misyabem is below Misha oleh zikas Shnei Yavim. There's no mitzvah of Yibum if there's a zika through two Yevamim. And again, Rabbi said, I don't know what case the Gemara is talking about, because our case is a case of a D'Rabbanan. And if you darshan something from a pasuk, obviously you're talking about a scenario which is Dorais. I don't know what that scenario is. Uben osaf sober Rabbanan, shegam tzara sa eshes hasheni. So we're talking about Shimon's other wife, we call her Rivka. Eino misyabemes lelevi. Now, why is that? The tzara is now a tzara of Eshes Shnei Yevamim. Again, all this is the Rabbanan. Eshes Shnei Yevamim does not fall for Yibum. If she doesn't fall for Yibum, we go back to the status of Eshes Ach. Hence, Rivka is a tzara of an Eshes Ach of an Erev. The Maimar of Shimon is meaningless on a Doraisa level. Therefore, Rivka, the wife of Shimon, falls for Yibum to Levi. Sarah, the wife of Reuven, falls for Yibum to Levi. And if it happens to be coincidental, but Nebuch, two brothers died without children. There's a third brother, and he now could be having both the wife of his brother Reuven as well as the wife of his brother Shimon. That's all on a Doraisa level. Kevan she'ena maimer konim Doraisa el midrabanan. Kol isu zeu midrabanan nachnas gzeira. Then he writes, shekevan sheshtei yevamos elu niros hibos mibayis echad, because since Shimon implemented Maimar, it looks like Sarah is falling for Yibum through Shimon when Shimon dies, and Rivka likewise. So now he has two wives of his late brother Shimon, and in such a case, he's only having one and not the other, when in truth, on a Doraisa level, she doesn't fall. Sarah is not falling even from Shimon. She's falling for even from Reuven, and now it's a coincidence of two brothers leaving two wives, and he could be miyabim both of them. We're not going to allow him to be miyabim both of them because Rabbanan, as a result of the mimer of Shimon, it looks like the status of Sarah is that of Esha Shnei Yevamot. Why? Because since Shimon implemented mimer, it looks like she's coming through Shimon. On a Doraisa level, she's coming through Reuven. And he could be miyabim both Eshes Reuven Sarah and Eshes Shimon Rivka. On a Drabbana level, having recognized the mimer of Shimon, now it comes out that now it comes out that she's Eshes Shnei Yevamot. Do I have that right? Just 1 second. No. Wait. I made one mistake. Again, on a Deraisa level, he can marry both of them. Correct? Because we don't recognize the mimer of Shimon. That's on a Deraisa. Now on a Drabbana level, what happens? Oh, now I got it. On a Drabbana level, it looks like Shimon was married to two wives, so he can't be miyabim both of them. Now, in this case, in miyabim eshteyan, yomru sheshtei yevamos abos v'baisechem misyavos. So you remember, Steve, we discussed this in the previous shit, that somehow it's wild, but in the mind of the spectator, when two women fall for yibum to the same person from two different brothers, one yibum is enough, and the other one doesn't require yibum or chalitza, which is totally wrong. It's total amaratzis, but it's very attractive in the mind of the spectator, because since there's only one yavam, why should he have to do two yibums? Well, in truth, he has to do two yibums because they're coming from two different brothers. So lahakim zera l'shein liachim is vis-a-vis both Reuben and Shimon, who both died. They should check their mezuzahs, as kabbalah. Right. So there's a real chashash d'Rabbanan that someone might come to the conclusion that when two wives of two brothers respectively fall for yibum to the third brother, one yibum would be enough, or one chalitza would be sufficient. That's the chashash that we're worried about. And in this case, it really looks the same as two yivamos coming from two different brothers. Why? Because in Ochinami on a Deraisa level, that's what it is. One second. I'm missing one now. Because he did Maimar. Where's the Maimar come to place?
The Maimar is the two, Sarah and Rivka.
Right.
Only one of them could fall for Yibum.
Oh, he can't be
now,
miyabim both of them?
And he has to give chalitza to the other one.
In other words, why is it that he cannot be miyabim both of them? Because it looks like they're both coming from Shimon. Got it. Right.
And
so it's really like we're attacking this from all sides. You know, on the one hand, we're worried about two different wives from, two different yibums and zikas from two different brothers. And that's why we cannot allow for one of them to go free without yibum or chalitza. On the other hand, we cannot allow yibum to both of them because having recognized the maimar, she is married, like Rivka, she is married to Shimon. I have to go over this 50 times. Yeah. That's the nature of Masechet Yevamot. So he writes, we're going on now to the left column, we have to end soon. He says, Im yibem eshneim, yomru sheshtei yevamos habos mibaisechet misyamos, because of the mimer. Because once again, if we recognize the mimer, it looks like both of them are married to Shimon. So what's so terrible about that? The Olios shekodem yachlitzu li achas the achar yivmu es hashniya. Yevos a isa shel kemen shel abana shelo yiv, which might be an isa kares. Rabbi Shimon Cholet v'sober shemiyabem liezu sheyirtze v'choletz l'shniya. Mishum shelidaito ein al eshes harishon, which we called Sarah, zika shnei yevamim, even shemamar im hu kone kinyan gomer hu kone. Second, ein al eshes harishon zika shnei yevamim. Because on the tzad that mimer is Kona, it's Kona according to Shimon and Kinyan Gomer, and therefore she is married to Shimon. So there's no Shnei Yevamim here, there's only one Yavam. Elo, Shemistape. Now he has another tzad in some Yachena Mimer called O She'eno Kona Klal. And on the tzad of Eno Kona Klal, Enkan Zika Shnei Yevamim. Again, if mimer is Kona Kinyan Gomur, then we have what? Then we have Zikas. Just one second. If mimer is Kona Kinyan Gomur, so then we have Zika Shnei Yevamim. Did I get that right? Rav Shimon Cholik Kisov Shebiyam Leizer Shir Tzivcholik Mishum Shel Daito Ein Al Eishes Arishon Zika Shnei Yevamim. Oh, right. So he has to exclude Zika Shnei Yevamim. Otherwise, there's no Yibam for anybody, or no Chalitza for anybody. Even Shemaimer Imhu Kone is therefore a Kiyutim, and therefore she's only the Yavam. She's only Ashes the Yavam Hasheni, meaning Shimon, or the. One second, or the other. The other option is that Zika, that mimer is nothing. If mimer is nothing, for sure she's not H. So there's no issue here of Zika Shnei Yevamim. Ela shemistape kimachen mimer kona o eno kona klal. Im kain enkan zika shnei yevamim. What does he mean, enkan zika shnei yevamim? If mimer is not kona at all, if mimer is not kona at all, then the two different brothers married to two different sisters, to two different women. If mimer kona. Rei Ashes Hasheni Legam, the Enola Zikas Arishon, the Mimer Eno Kona Rei Ashes Arishon, and there's no relation to the chain. The Eshel Rak Zikas Arishon. Omnam Litzada Sofik Shema Mimer Kona is Osolo Liab Mishteyan. Why? Because then it's a Yevamos with one Yavam. Zika Shnei Yavam. Sharei Shtei Noshos Hasheni. Oh, yeah, he says it more straightforward that, this is the case where a brother died, left two wives. Shtei Yevamos both by Sechem Misyav. One second. Shtei Yevamos both by Echod. Ein Misyavos. I think he means there's no yibum to both of them. That's not possible. Litzara Sofe. Maimer Eno Kone Ein Nifteres Achas v'Mais Shnia, because they're two different brothers. They're coming from two different brothers. Al Kain Miyavim Li'achas v'Choletz Shnia. All right. I think it's late already. It's here. We actually, if you could hold on to this page, we'll finish up on Yom Rishon. And then, in terms of the Gemara, we're up to the Mishnah itself, the second Mishnah, which is Ben Teishish. Given, so Mirza Hashem, I'll see you, Steve, on Sunday, and David on Monday, hopefully. And Shabbat Shalom. And Ruvain, what's your schedule?
Sunday should be good. Sunday.
Sunday. Okay, great. So have a great Shabbos.